Hi, it's Penny here. Welcome to what I think will be part 6 of the series where I am reading the first chapter of every book series that I'm interested in trying. So primarily fantasy and science fiction series. This video we're going to be focusing on books where I just think they have cool concepts. And so I want to read them. So as usual, I have managed to get about half, so 4 of the books from the library, and then I have another 5 that I also want to try, and we're just going to start from the top of the pile, which is Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. To be honest, I have watched the movie version of this, but I had heard of the book before the movie, and what I think I know about the book is that none of the characters are referred to by their actual names. They're all referred to by their job title, like the biologist and the psychologist and things like that. And it's this group of women who are being sent into Area X. No one really knows what goes on in Area X because it all seems very strange. A bunch of people have gone into it before and always come out, well, either not come out at all or come out with very strange stories or something like that. It's a fairly short one. I hope that doesn't mean, sometimes with short books that means like the first chapter is like half the book. Oh, yeah, the first chapter of this one is 35 pages out of 200. I can see that there are also like these little feathery breaks in the chapters, so we'll see whether I read the whole chapter or whether I just read to one of those feathery breaks, depending on how far I have to get through it to feel like I've gotten a feel for whether I'm going to love this or not. Okay, so the first chapter of Annihilation. Firstly, I will say I did try the audiobook. I try to at least try the audiobook sample for all of these book series that I'm trying. And I thought the audiobook was okay, but I feel like because the whole thing about this book is really about not knowing what's going on, and I feel like when you're listening to an audiobook, you don't get the chance to like read the strange things and have time to try and put together your own ideas about what might be going on. And just for me in general, I remember things better when I've read them physically. So I do think for this one I am still going to read it physically, especially because they're so short, so that makes it a lot easier. I think I also didn't say that this was originally a 3-book series, although just recently Jeff Vandermeer put out a 4th book, which I think was quite a surprise to a lot of people. And the series is called the Southern Reach series. So the Southern Reach is the organization that's arranging these excursions into Area X. And as I expected, we have these 4 women with these different roles: the biologist, the anthropologist, the surveyor, and the psychologist. And they just refer to each other by those titles because they're meant to try to avoid like personal connections. I don't know, they've been given a lot of guidance about how they should act when they're in Area X, but mostly it's still very vague about what's going on. I actually did only read to the first feathery break because I felt like that was enough for me to decide where this would go in priority. I mean, obviously for this video, this is the first book I've read, so it's at the top and the bottom, but in my bigger priority. So the way I've been doing it is I have, at this point, because there's so many series that I've tried a chapter of, I have a bunch of different priority lists that are prioritized. It's getting complicated, but that's where we're at. I do actually think though, after a lot of debate with myself, I think this is going to go on my top priority list. Now, it might just be because at the moment I'm in the mood for some weird sci-fi, but still, I think I'm going to put it in my top priority list, and I think I'm going to put it above The Art of Prophecy, just because I found myself a lot more intrigued about what was going on with this than I did The Art of Prophecy. But I didn't put it above On the Edge by Alona Andrews because I know I'm going to have a lot of fun with On the Edge. In fact, I've already read it and I know I had a lot of fun. But I loved the first chapter of On the Edge. It made me feel so connected to the characters straight away, whereas this didn't give me that character connection. And actually my top priority list is now at 12 books, I think. And the rule is if it goes above that, then I have to break it into 2 lists. This is the rule I've recently made up. So we'll see if that ends up happening in this video. If it does, I'm prepared. So then that means the next chapter I will be trying is from A Memory Called Empire. So the series is called some weird word that I can't really say. And so far, oh, here it is. Oh, it does actually here say the Teixcalaan duology. It says it's a duology here. I wasn't sure from what I found on the internet, whether it was a duology or just more of an open world. Even though it says duology, I'm still a little bit suspicious from the way it's framed online that it's going to be left open for more things to be written in this world, which, I mean, if I love this, that will be good. So my understanding of this book series is that we are following a woman who is taking on this new political position. And the way things work in this world is that when someone takes over your role, you get all of their memories, so you know everything about what's going on. But the person that she's taking over from has been missing for a year, or they've just gone missing, but a year of their memories are missing, or all their memories are missing. I'm not sure. But anyway, she has to try and deal with this complex political situation while not having all the information that she's supposed to have. And I've heard really great things about it, so let's try it. Okay, so I want to admit that it has been several days because I realized that reading the first chapter of this, or the prelude in the first chapter, yeah, I realized it was 40 pages. And also, I did listen to the audiobook sample, and after that, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can read 40 pages of this, because the audiobook sample just wasn't really, I don't know, wasn't giving me the vibes. I didn't really feel very engaged in what was going on. But then I picked up the book and started reading the words with my eyes, and I loved it so much more. It's kind of reminding me of the Imperial Reg trilogy by Anne Leckie, of which I've read the first 2 books now. And I also did read the first chapter as part of this project, so anyway, that's a sidetrack. It's reminding me of that in that a little bit of the writing style, but also we have this big empire that's kind of colonizing the whole universe. And there's a lot of cultural information in the story that isn't necessarily well explained to you, but it definitely gives the world a lot of depth. So what's happened in this is we have this separate space station, and they've been told they need to send a new ambassador to the city, the capital city of this empire. And they're like, well, what happened to the old one? And they're not told. So they've sent this new woman along to be the new ambassador. And normally in the space station, when someone takes on a new job or a new position, they take on all the memories of the people who've done these positions in the past. And this is something the Empire doesn't know that they do. So normally she would turn up in this ambassador role with the memories of all the people who've been in the role before. And it's meant to be kind of a process where they integrate into her personality. However, this old ambassador hadn't been back to the space station for 15 years, so all they've got of him is this old scan. And then she hasn't really been able to properly integrate his personality into herself, so it's feeling a lot like he's this voice in her head that sometimes takes over her body. And she's turned up at this capital city and trying to work out what's happened to the old ambassador, what is the situation, what is she supposed to be doing, and she doesn't really have all the information that she's supposed to have. And yeah, I really liked this. I'm definitely very intrigued about the world. I love the way that it's describing this empire, and also how it's describing her having this other guy within herself. So, in terms of priority, I would say I'm putting this above Annihilation. Annihilation was interesting, intriguing, but A Memory Called Empire really feels like it could have a lot of depth. Then, in the bigger priority, I want to put this in my top priority list because I'm super excited to get to it now. But I think I said before, my limit for these lists now is 12 books, and if I put this in my top priority list, then we're past the limit. So I'm going to split my top priority list into just top priority and then 5-star predictions. Does it make sense for there to be a priority list above top priority? Probably not, but I think I'm just going to do it anyway. And then I think I am actually going to put A Memory Called Empire in my 5-star prediction list. And then the big question is whether I put it above Parable of the Sower, because I don't think that I'm as excited about it as any of the other books on the list. So it's either at the bottom of the 5-star prediction list or above Parable of the Sower. I do think I'm going to put it under Parable of the Sower just because that's a shorter series. I found it like an easier read, more digestible. And also I feel like the themes of Parable of the Sower, like religion and dystopia, are particularly interesting. And also Parable of the Sower has that whole thing where it's set in 2024 and 2025, so I do want to get to that sooner. This one, I'm still a little bit unsure whether it will be 5 stars, but I definitely see the potential there. So that's that. Then the next book that I will be trying the first chapter of is River God by Wilbur Smith. Now, did I ever think I would be considering picking up a Wilbur Smith book? No, I mean, I don't really know anything about him, but I feel like he writes more like historical fiction. Honestly, I don't really know anything about Wilbur Smith, but I think I always see him at like those book fairs where a lot of the books are like old people books, which really isn't a great reason to think that those books aren't going to be good, but that's how I always feel. So really the only reason I put this on my TBR is because at one point I was looking for fantasy books that had like some kind of Egyptian inspired magic, and I don't really know that that is what this is. I mean, it's definitely Egyptian inspired, set in ancient Egypt, but other than that I don't really know. I guess we'll try the first chapter and see. Okay, so I read the first chapter of River God, and it took me a while because I realized this is another like 40-page first chapter. And as well, I don't know, I feel a bit mixed about the writing style. I found it a bit difficult to get through, although part of me thinks maybe it is somewhat similar to Robin Hobb in the Realm of the Elderlings in terms of writing style. We're getting this slave's perspective, and he's also a eunuch, and he's gone out like hippo hunting with this young girl or young woman. So he's gone out hippo hunting with her and also this warrior that she has like a crush on, and he's very jealous because even though he's a eunuch, he has this big crush on her as well. So it's a big love triangle thing, and there's this big kind of action sequence about hunting this hippo and like lots of explanation about the bows and how they work and all the experiments that the slave guy has done. But kind of the main conflict that's introduced in this first chapter is just that this young woman wants to like marry this warrior guy, but the king, the young woman's the princess or some shit. The king though hates this guy, so it's going to be a big drama, and she's asking the slave to support the marriage because she thinks the king will listen to him, and he's like, doubtful. So like it was kind of fine, but it's all very drawn out, and I don't care about that love triangle at all. And I didn't really enjoy reading about the hippo hunt either. I felt kind of sad for the hippo. And as well, right near the beginning, there's like a reference to this young woman's period, and just in general, men writing about women's periods is not something I enjoy. And there's quite a few references. Just the way that the slave is viewing this woman is quite icky. In my opinion, I didn't enjoy it. And maybe the slave guy's gonna kind of learn a lesson about that as we go. It's kind of implying that he doesn't have a full understanding of who this young woman is. But I don't know, I just struggled through this. And I don't really think, even if there is some kind of fantastical element in this, I don't really think it's going to be for me. So that's a shame. Oh, also, I did find out this is like a 9-book series and it's still going. There's still books being published. So I just don't think I want to get into that. So in terms of this video, obviously it's going at the bottom. And then in my bigger priority, I'm going to put it on the prob not for me list, and I'm actually going to put it at the bottom. Because even though the other books on this part of the list also probably aren't for me, I think I'd rather read all of them than have to push through River God. So yeah, this is actually the worst book, or at least the book least for me out of all the books I've read in this project, or all the books I've tried. So let's try and forget about that. The next book I will be picking up is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. I think it's Islington, not Islington. So he is getting a lot of hype at the moment for his other series, his newest series, The Will of the Many, which I did also try actually as part of this project, and I do have it on my priority list quite high. It's on the top priority list, which if you remember is not at the top. Anyway, I actually had this on my TBR, or like books I wanted to try, series I wanted to get to since before The Will of the Many was published, because I think this has some kind of time travel element, maybe. I actually don't know any more about it other than that, even though I have seen a lot of people talk about this and
mostly love it. I have seen some people not love it, so I guess I'll try the first chapter. I think this is a trilogy. Yes, it's called the Licanius trilogy, and all the books are quite fat, so that could be good, could be bad. Is this another really long first chapter? No, it's only 13 pages. So much better. Yeah, okay, I listened to the audiobook of this, and it's Michael Kramer, who did like all the Wheel of Time audiobooks, as well as a bunch of Brandon Sanderson ones. I really didn't like the Wheel of Time. That's maybe not true. There were some parts that I liked, but the series as a whole I found very exhausting and disappointing. And even though I did use the audiobooks to make my way through it, the whole experience of having to like force myself to pay attention and listen to these audiobooks where like it was just so long and drawn out, it's kind of ruined Michael Kramer and Kate Reading for me as audiobook narrators. Like anytime I hear them, I'm like, do I have to listen to this? And I think they're great audiobook narrators, but anyway, Wheel of Time ruined it for me. And also, I'm looking at the back of this book and it's talking about how similar this book is to Wheel of Time. Are we in trouble here? Because I really want to see promise in this, but I'm aware that actually the first book of Wheel of Time I thought was okay as well, so I don't know. But this is only a trilogy, which is a good sign. So this, I don't know, I thought it was going to have some kind of time travel element to it. And I mean, I guess that Wheel of Time comparison might be a suggestion. All we really got in the first chapter, well, there was a prologue first that I don't really understand what was going on at all. A bunch of weirdly named people that could be like Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time inspired, and this guy kind of talking to some, I don't know, like Stormfather type character, some voice in the mountains about how he's been lied to. Anyway, didn't really understand the prologue at all, but I assume it will make sense eventually. Then the first chapter was really just about these two boys in this magic school, and it seems like you're not allowed to leave the magic school or you will be turned into a shadow, like if you use magic outside the magic school without permission, I guess. I don't know. If you use magic outside the magic school, you get turned into a shadow, which seems to be this young boy had like these big dark veins put on his face, and then I think he's going to be exiled, I think. And then this other boy is supposed to be doing some kind of magic test in the near future, and he's not able to do the magic that he's supposed to be doing, and he's afraid, I think, that he's going to be made into a shadow as a result. To be honest, it's making me think of, what is that series called? Wow, I really can't remember. That one by Sebastian de Castell, I'll put it here. That's very similar in that there is shadow magic that makes black tattoos come all over your face. And also it starts with this young boy leading up to his magic exams and thinking, shit, I'm not going to pass this. And perhaps leaning towards doing something against the rules in order to pass his test. So it's definitely reminding me of that. It's quite slow. We didn't get much in the first chapter, so it didn't do much to like draw me in. But it was quite readable, and it kind of has that classic fantasy vibe, so I'm still intrigued, especially with like still that vague notion that it might have some kind of time travel-y element. So I think where I'm going to put this in terms of this video, I'm definitely going to put it above River God, but I don't think I'm going to put it above Annihilation, because I'm still definitely more like intrigued, mystified what's going on with Annihilation. So I'm going to put it in here in terms of priority. Definitely better than River God, but that's not hard. Or at least definitely more to my taste, more to my preference than River God. Then in terms of the bigger priority, I'm going to put it on my intrigued list, because I had a look at the books on my keen list, and I don't think like the concept, or at least the concept that was introduced in that first chapter, I don't think it's quite as cool as those ones. Like those all have like death and aliens and cool stuff going on. And from what I got in the first chapter of The Shadow of What Was Lost, it just wasn't cool enough, but it might get there. So I'm going to put it in the intrigued priority list, and then I'm going to put it right at the top. I think that's right. It's actually hard because I have picked up a lot of books in this intrigued list at this point, and so it's hard for me to just compare those like first impressions of the first chapter when I've now read more than that for some of these. But if I mainly just look at the one that was at the top, Mort, like, I'm actually now doubting that that really belongs above all these others. But we're going to leave it there. And I'm definitely more interested in The Shadow of What Was Lost, even though I enjoyed Mort. I think this writing style is more to my taste, and I'm enjoying like this big epic fantasy that I can feel is being set up. So that's where I'm going to put this one. Then the next book that I'm going to try a chapter of is A History. Oh, I'm pretty sure it's A History of What Comes Next by Sylvain Neuvel. So Sylvain Neuvel wrote The Themis Files that I really enjoyed. Admittedly, the first book was probably better than the later ones, but I enjoyed the whole series, and so I actually wanted to pick up this trilogy when it first started coming out. Now it's all completed and I still haven't picked it up, so I would like to. This is another one that has a time travel element in it, although it's also historical fiction, but it's historical fiction in that this is a story about this woman who is part of a family, I think, that has basically been influencing human society over time in order to get us to like move towards traveling to space. I feel like there's going to be some kind of alien element in there somewhere, but I'm pretty sure it also said time travel as well as like alien contact. So we'll see. And I think it's set in like World War II sort of times or something. Anyway, we'll try the first chapter and we will see what we think. Okay, so A History of What Comes Next. Firstly, I think the audiobook is going to be the way to go for this one because it's like a full cast narration, the same as The Themis Files by the same author. And even though the audiobook sample only was the introduction, so the introduction is basically this woman talking about how she's kind of taken over from her mother. It seems like there's these generations of women and perhaps they're not having children in the same way because it's always another daughter after another daughter, and they talk about the pair of them being like the 98th or the 99th and how there can only be 3 for a short period of time and then the mother will kill herself, it seems like. So the introduction is all from this mother's perspective, or I think it's actually going to be the grandmother of the main character. But his grandmother is talking about how they're living in Germany kind of just before World War II and they're working to kind of further the science of humanity. It's definitely, I'm getting the feel of them trying to push humanity towards space, and their full focus is how do they make sure the science is happening and the technological advancement. And the mother, I think the mother of the grandmother, it's confusing. Anyway, she started kind of investigating CO2 and being like, oh shit, I think actually we've only got a limited amount of time left to achieve what we want to achieve. So the introduction was kind of just the setup of what's going on. And then chapter 1 comes in with this granddaughter, or this young girl who's 19, and she's been sent to this like Nazi camp, I think to try and get this nuclear physicist to like defect to the US so that they can like keep his science going. So I will admit I didn't like the writing as much in the first chapter, and I'm a little bit annoyed that I couldn't get an audiobook sample of the first chapter, because I think that would have given me a good idea of whether that difference in writing style is still going to be good with the audiobook, you know? But I think it will be based on the Themis file experience. So I think I am still going to rate this quite highly because it is a really interesting setup. It actually was really giving me like Claire North and the first 15 Lives of Harry August vibes, which I did quite like. Although, I mean, I've heard that this has time travel, or I thought that this book series had some kind of time travel element. And of course, we didn't get any of that in the first chapter. Can I look? A cheat for if you're wondering if a book has time travel is to look it up on Goodreads and see if it's tagged time travel. It is not. So maybe I've misled myself. Anyway, if I don't have the books, hang on. So, if I am prioritizing it in amongst the books that I've read from this video, I think I'm going to put it above The Shadow of What Was Lost, just because the concept is more interesting, even though probably the writing in The Shadow of What Was Lost was like more consumable and more enjoyable to my taste. I still think the concept of what we got in the first chapter, at least, of The Shadow of What Was Lost, I think the concept of A History of What Comes Next was better, but I'd probably still put Annihilation ahead of that as more interesting overall, and like just because Annihilation is shorter, so I know it won't be as much to get through. So I'm going to put it in there. And then, in terms of the bigger priority, I don't think I'm going to put it in my top priority list with Annihilation. I think that's a bit too high for it, and I definitely want to read all the other books in that list more. But I did say it was higher than The Shadow of What Was Lost, so let's put it in my keen list. And I think I'm going to put it in between Dawn and The Last Wish. I do think both the writing and the setup in Dawn were more interesting. It's kind of like first contact with aliens, but the writing style in that was like something that pulled me in, whereas A History of What Comes Next wasn't quite doing that. But I do think the writing of A History of What Comes Next was still more easily consumable than The Last Wish, and the story was a little bit more unique. So I think I'm going to put it in that gap. Oh, and I should say actually that series that I just read, the series is called Take Them to the Stars, where I guess them is humanity. So the next series that I'm going to try the first book from is the 5 Penalties series. So the first book is The Helm of Midnight. Now all I know about this is that I've seen some people really loving it, and also I think it's about like magical masks, but maybe they're like taking the spirits of someone, something, and putting them into these masks to give them the powers that they have. So I don't really know much more than that, but I'll read the first chapter and we'll see what we think. Okay, so change of plans. I am not going to be trying The Helm of Midnight because it looks like neither the audiobook or the ebook are available in New Zealand. And then as well, my library doesn't have like the physical copy. I can see that my old library in my old town had it, but like I don't have access to that anymore. So like I just can't really get it anymore. So that's kind of annoying. I already have a little collection of books that I've discovered along the way during this project that I can't get my hands on. I mean, I can probably order it physically, like buy it, but there's probably a lot of books that I would want to buy before I get to that. So for now, it's just going to go on a little collection of maybe one day, I guess. And maybe one day they'll sort out the digital access to it. So that means I'm going to move on to the next book, which is actually Hidden Blade by P. Dacosta, or I think I just saw online Pippa Dacosta. So this is another one where I picked it up purely because I was looking for those like Egyptian inspired fantasy books. Like I really want some magic inspired by Egyptian mythology. I don't really think this is going to be what I'm looking for either, so I don't know really why I put it on the list, but I guess I was hopeful. We'll see. It's a 6-book series and I did already check it's available. In fact, it's available for free online, so if this does look like something that's interesting to you, I think you can just read the first book for free. So I'm going to try that and hopefully I'll love it. Okay, so I tried the first chapter of Hidden Blade and I did think it was quite fun. It has me kind of thinking of the Dresden Files, except I guess it's going to have some kind of Egyptian elements. There was a little mention of a couple of Egyptian gods and some hieroglyphs or something. But mostly it seemed like this guy has come because these kids have used some kind of ancient Egyptian thing to summon a demon and he's gonna try and kill the demon. It also seems like he's kind of a bad guy as well as being a good guy. I saw somewhere actually in the synopsis it called him an anti-hero, so I guess that's what's happening there. Like, so it was fun, but there's a but. It didn't really like make me desperate to know what was going to happen in the story. It didn't really introduce anything particularly cool, like it was just a demon being summoned. Like, it was well written. I thought there was some cleverness to it. I was trying to be a bit humorous though, like maybe even a little bit like Buffy. I don't know. It's probably just like a lot of urban fantasies, except I assume it's going to have this Egyptian element, which is interesting, but I don't know. I think if I am putting it in the priority order, I would put it above River God. It was definitely more to my preference than that. Definitely felt like it was going to be more fun and a lot easier to get through. But I still think The Shadow of What Was Lost seems like it will be more interesting and more to my taste. Like, I don't always like books that are a lot of fun, as I describe this. So I'll probably put it in there. And then in the bigger priority, I think I would probably only put it in my maybe priority list because I don't even think that this is definitely one that I'm willing to read. Like, it's one I would read if I had nothing else to read. But if I never read it, I probably wouldn't be too upset. But I do think if I look at this maybe list, it probably is the closest to my preference, like my taste, because Spinner is YA and
written in red is kind of like romantasy, and then Rocannon's world was kind of like weird, like sci-fi Lord of the Rings. Anyway, I do think I'd probably have a lot more fun with Hidden Blade than any of those, so I'm going to put it at the top of my maybe list. Maybe we'll pick it up. Maybe. I do think it could be a lot of fun. Like, if it sounds interesting to you, I would still probably recommend it, but maybe not for me. But maybe. Also, I did listen to the audiobook. It seemed fine, but it also seemed like the kind of audiobook where I would listen to it and stop paying attention. I can't really describe why, but that's how I feel about it, so I probably wouldn't pick this up by audiobook. So then the next series that I'm going to try is The Wanderers, or the Wanderer series by Chuck Wendig. So this, I think, is not really a series, it's more just a book with a sequel, but for my purposes, I'm counting it as a series. And I think as well, the first book was published around 2019, so just before COVID, and this is a story about like a sleepwalking pandemic. Suddenly lots of people just start falling asleep and like walking while they're asleep, and kind of like gathering together, I think. I know when COVID kind of hit and people were recommending pandemic books to read, that's when I heard about this one. And I would be interested because the sequel was published in 2022, and I feel like that there might have some COVID influence into it. So I'd be interested to see kind of the difference between the first book and the second book. Obviously that we won't get that in this video. This video we're just going to try the first chapter and we'll see what we think. Okay, so the first chapter of Wanderers, well actually first there was a prelude which was really setting up the idea that this comet is going to become past, so it's all framed around this comet. The prelude was really about the woman who discovered this comet but apparently was going to be dead before the comet ever arrived. But then chapter 1, we're basically getting this teenage girl who's going to be the first of these sleepwalkers. And we're still getting that framing of the comet somehow being involved, it seems like. And we're also introduced to the idea that when these sleepwalkers are walking, you can't stop them because as soon as you stop them, they start like, I don't know, bloodshot eyes and bleeding and like they're going to die. So I think that's going to be kind of the reasoning why these sleepwalkers are then allowed to keep walking. But most of the chapter was really about like the family dynamics of the family of this teenage girl, because it's like her older sister that discovers that she's sleepwalking. And I get the feeling that this is going to be a very like character focused story. It does actually remind me a little bit of The Dreamers by Karen Walker Thompson. Now, I didn't really like that. It was a little bit too literary for me, but I also felt like I was frustrated with that we didn't get enough of each character and we didn't get enough character development, whereas The Wanderers was so long. I feel like we are going to get a lot of in-depth story of each of the characters, even though I do think it's going to switch between a bunch of different perspectives. So it was an interesting beginning. I do also think, as I said, this is a long story, but the audiobook narrations seem pretty good. Now again, I think it's like a full cast type audiobook with each of the different perspectives being narrated by different people. So I'm not sure that the first chapter, or actually, I think the audiobook sample was really just the prelude. So I'm not sure. No, that's not true. The audiobook sample did include a bit of chapter 1, but I'm still not sure like how representative that will be of all of the chapters and all the different narrators. But still, I think I would read this via audiobook, because even though I liked it, I didn't love it. Like there was nothing really going on in that first chapter where I was like, oh my goodness, I need to read this. I'm going to love this. But I'm still definitely interested. So let's prioritize it. In terms of this pile, I would put it above these Egyptian ones, but not above The Shadow of What Was Lost. I still think The Shadow of What Was Lost sounds more interesting to me, and the writing style was more to my taste. So then in the bigger priority, as I said, I want to read this, but I wasn't necessarily loving it, so that makes it firmly go into the want to read priority list. And actually, let me grab my list. So I think I'm going to put it underneath The Ninth Reign, because I still think The Ninth Reign, even though there were some things that I didn't like about it, the general fantasy world and setup was more interesting, and the writing style was probably more to my taste, even though it wasn't fully to my taste. So I'll put The Wanderers under that, but then I was looking at the ones just under that, and it's definitely better than The Gunslinger, which is why I do want it there. But then I was thinking, is The Gunslinger really better than
the next few on the list. And I don't really think so. So I think actually we're just going to do a little list edit and we're going to move the Gunslinger down under Daughter of Smoke and Bone. I think that's actually where that belongs. Maybe I'm misremembering, but if I didn't move it, I just feel like it makes future decisions harder because a book could be worse than something and better than something else, if you know what I mean. Because honestly, I also think that Leviathan Wakes and Gardens of the Moon are actually more to my taste just because of the fantasy and sci-fi elements than The Wanderers. So I'm actually going to move those two above The Wanderers or move The Wanderers under those. Same thing. So that's a bit of a shuffle, but I think this will be the priority of my want to read list. To be honest, there's so many more books or book series that I'm more excited about than these that I don't know when I'll get to these. However, maybe I'll get to the audiobook ones sooner. There's a few on this list that I'm interested in reading via audiobook, and I'm short on audiobook series still, so I might get to those sooner. We'll see. So that means we are going to be up to the last book series that I'm going to try in this video, and that is The Song of Penelope. So I think the first book is called Ithaca. This is basically a Greek myth retelling, telling the story of Penelope while Odysseus was off on his odyssey being a terrible husband. As you know, my name is Penny. I really like the myth of Penelope, and so when I found out Clear North had done a Greek myth retelling of Penelope's story, of course I want to read it. I have also, I don't know, kind of had mixed experiences with Clear North before. Her books are ones that I both love and struggle through at the same time, but those are kind of like weird sci-fi books, whereas this is, I think, more of a classic Greek myth retelling, but based on everything I've read by Clear North, I just can't really imagine her doing anything normal, so I guess we'll see. So I think this is just a trilogy, but let's try the first chapter. Okay, so I finished the first chapter of Ithaca, and I'm a little bit mixed on it. It's quite slow and reflective, and kind of a little bit snarky, which I like. So mainly, the first chapter is just Penelope kind of observing, or I assume it's Penelope. It didn't really say explicitly, but it said enough. So it's from the perspective of Penelope, who's kind of observing this town as it's attacked by like pirate type people, essentially. And Penelope is like fairly disconnected from things, and it's kind of almost written like a little bit humorous at times. And Penelope is like really snarky whenever she references the gods or her husband. So I quite liked that attitude to things. But I also think like because it was quite slow, firstly, I'm going to say no to the audiobook because I kind of like whenever it references different Greek myth things to have a chance to think about what it's referencing, whereas when it's an audiobook, it just keeps going and I miss my chance to think about things. And I didn't really like the audiobook narration style anyway, so I'd rather read this physically. But I do think because of that writing style, like I think I could quite like it. And maybe it is what I'm expecting from Clear North in terms of a Greek myth retelling, in terms of it being a little bit strange while also still being like fairly true to the myth that it's retelling. But I think I could like it, but only if I am reading it in a situation where I really can take my time with it. So I think in terms of the priority for this video, I'm going to stick it in this gap, which there's a bunch of books in here, like you have to imagine them. So maybe I'll actually make a picture. I think I'm going to put it above The Wanderers just because, I don't know, it felt a little bit more special, a little bit more interesting. And maybe that's just that I have a preference for something a little bit more fantastical than a straight contemporary. Although, like, The Wanderers obviously is going to get more interesting, but what we got from the first chapter felt very contemporary. And then Ithaca had like those references to the gods, which seemed a lot more interesting to me, especially Penelope's attitude towards them. So I think I'll put it there. I won't put it above The Shadow of What Was Lost though, just because I think the writing style for that was a lot easier to read. And overall, I still think the ideas in The Shadow of What Was Lost, like the world, seemed more interesting rather than just a general Greek myth retelling. That's the priority in terms of this video. And in fact, I've read all the books I'm going to try for this video now, so that's where we ended up. If I'm putting Ithaca into the bigger priority though, I think once again I'm going to put it into that want to read list because I still want to read it, but I wouldn't say I'm like super intrigued or keen. It's definitely not a top priority. So in my want to read list, I shuffled this around a little bit. I think I'm going to put it above Gardens of the Moon just because the characters and the story seem more interesting than that. But I'm not going to put it above Leviathan Wakes just because the mystery. I think Leviathan Wakes always pulls itself up based on the prologue. I didn't really like chapter 1, but the prologue was interesting. So we'll keep Leviathan Awakes above Ithaca because of that. Just the setup was much more interesting. So at this point in this project, I've actually started on reading a lot of the books in my like top priority 5-star prediction lists. And I've even read a few of the audiobook ones in like my keen and intrigued lists. So then now we're at this want to read list level. I have got a few in here that I want to try by audiobook. I might get to those this year, but the others I'm probably not going to get to anytime soon. And I'm probably okay with that. But do let me know if there's any on this want to read list that you think I should reconsider trying to get to sooner. I don't know if I'll be convinced, but maybe. Anyway, other than that, this will be the end of the video. So let me know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video, because I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.